My cousin looked at me across that bar table, at my painted nails, my sundress, the little gold hoops in my ears, and he laughed. "Can you fight?" he asked, like it was the funniest question in the world, like the answer was so obviously no that asking it was already a joke. I took a slow sip of my drink, set it down, looked him dead in the eye. "Only hand to hand," I said. "Knives were optional." He laughed harder, slapped the table. "Let me guess. They called you Princess, right?" I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. "They called me Hades." And that's when the man 2 bar stools down, a big, broad-shouldered guy in a worn flannel shirt who hadn't said a single word all night, slowly set his glass on the counter. It tipped. Bourbon splashed across the wood. He didn't even look down. He was staring at me. You want to know how a girl from a quiet suburb in Connecticut ends up with a call sign like Hades? Pull up a chair. This is going to take a minute. My name is Elara Voss, and for the first 18 years of my life, I was exactly what I looked like. A straight-A student, a decent soccer player, a girl who liked crime novels and vanilla lattes, and had exactly 0 disciplinary incidents on her school record. My mom, Sandra, was a high school English teacher. My dad, Robert, ran a landscaping company. We lived in a 3-bedroom colonial on Maple Ridge Drive in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and the most dangerous thing in our neighborhood was Mrs. Patterson's aggressive Labrador Duke, who had a grudge against mailmen. I was the middle child. My older brother, Jake, was the loud one. Football star, homecoming king, the kid everyone remembered. My younger sister, Chloe, was the sweet one. Art camp, volunteering, the kind of girl adults called an old soul. And me? I was just Elara, invisible in the best possible way. Not in a sad way. I want to be clear about that. I chose invisibility. I liked watching people. I liked being underestimated. Even then, at 17, there was something in me that understood the value of being the person no one thinks to worry about. I don't know where that instinct came from. Maybe it was genetic. Maybe it was all those crime novels. Or maybe it was the summer I turned 15, when my Uncle Frank, my dad's brother, a retired Marine, came to stay with us for 2 months after his divorce. Uncle Frank was the kind of man who looked at the world like a chessboard. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. And for some reason, maybe because I was the quiet one, the one always in the corner reading, he decided I was worth talking to. One afternoon, I found him in the backyard, going through what looked like a slow, deliberate set of movements. Not quite martial arts, not quite stretching, something in between. "What is that?" I asked. He looked at me, considered. "Krav Maga," he said. "Israeli military system, close quarters combat. Want to learn?" I should have said no. I had a book report due Monday. I was wearing flip-flops. "Yes," I said. That summer changed everything. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in movies, where a montage plays and suddenly the shy girl becomes an action hero in 60 seconds. Real training doesn't work like that. Real training is repetitive and humbling and painful and boring in the best possible way. It's drilling the same movement 400 times until your body stops thinking about it and just does it. It's Uncle Frank saying again in that flat Marine voice, and you going again, knuckles sore, legs burning, ego somewhere on the ground underneath your feet. But I loved it. I loved it the way some people love music or math or language. That deep cellular love that doesn't need a reason. I loved the logic of it, the honesty of it. A body in motion, either doing the right thing or not. No ambiguity, no interpretation, just physics and intention. By the end of the summer, Uncle Frank sat across from me at the kitchen table, folded his hands and said, "You have a gift, Elara. Don't waste it." He left the next morning, and I signed up for every class I could find. By the time I graduated high school, I had a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a solid foundation in Muay Thai, and I'd been privately training Krav Maga for 3 years. I also had a full academic scholarship to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., where I planned to study international relations. My parents threw a graduation party. Extended family drove in from all over, aunts and uncles and cousins I only saw at holidays. Everyone hugged me and asked what I wanted to be when I grew up. "Something in national security," I said. My Aunt Beverly laughed and said, "Oh, how exciting. Maybe you can be a diplomat. I smiled and said, maybe. That was the summer I met my cousin Marcus properly for the first time in years. He was 22, loud, funny, the kind of guy who walked into every room like he owned the square footage. He'd done 2 years at a community college and was now working at his dad's auto dealership in Hartford, selling Ford F-150S and Chevy Silverados to weekend warriors. Marcus thought he knew people. He had this talent for reading a room, figuring out the hierarchy, identifying who mattered and who didn't. He sized me up in about 30 seconds and decided I didn't. I let him. Georgetown was a revelation, not academically. I was prepared for that. The revelation was the people, the density of ambition in one place, the collision of backgrounds and ideologies and goals. I'd grown up in a quiet suburb. Suddenly, I was surrounded by the children of senators, military brats who'd lived on 4 continents, immigrants who'd survived things I couldn't imagine, legacy kids coasting on last names, and scrappy scholarship students like me who were there because they'd fought for every inch. I found my people fast. Her name was Dr. Catherine Cole, a professor of strategic studies who ran an informal training group on Friday evenings in the university gymnasium. It wasn't advertised. You had to be invited. A friend of a friend mentioned it in passing, and something in my gut said, go. So I went. There were 12 of us that first Friday. 12 students in workout clothes, standing in a semicircle while Dr. Cole, 45 years old, 5'4", looking like she could be someone's favorite book club mom, walked slowly around the mat and said, I'm going to teach you how to survive. Not how to fight. Most of you already know that. How to survive. Those are different things. She looked at me, right at me, out of all 12 of us. You, she said. You've trained. What's your background? Krav, BJJ, Muay Thai, I said. She nodded slowly. Good base. Bad habits. We'll fix that. I didn't know whether to be insulted or grateful. Both, it turned out. Junior year, Dr. Cole pulled me aside after a Friday session. I'm recommending you for a summer program, she said. She slid a single printed page across the table. No letterhead, no logo, just text. I read it twice. This is a government program, I said. Yes. This says candidates must be eligible for top secret clearance. Yes. I'm 20 years old. Yes. She looked at me steadily. Are you interested? I thought about Uncle Frank in the backyard. Don't waste it. Yes, I said. I can't tell you everything about that summer. I'm serious. There are things that are still classified, things I signed agreements about, things that live in a part of my memory I've learned to keep behind a very heavy door. What I can tell you is this. The program was in Virginia, rural Virginia, deep in the kind of countryside where the nearest town has one stoplight and everybody knows everybody and nobody asks questions about the facility 12 miles down the dirt road. There were 22 candidates when we started. By the end of the summer, there were 9. Nobody got hurt. I want to be clear about that. People dropped out. The pressure, the sleep deprivation, the psychological stress, the physical demands. It wasn't cruelty, it was filtration. They were looking for something specific in a person, and most people, even strong, smart, capable people, didn't have it. I had it. I didn't know what it was, exactly. I still don't know how to describe it in words. It's something like the ability to go very, very quiet inside yourself while everything outside is chaos, to become the eye of the storm, to look at a situation that is objectively terrifying and feel your mind slow down instead of panic. Some people have it naturally. Some people develop it. Some people never find it no matter what they do. My instructor that summer was a man called Chief. That was all we ever called him. He was built like a refrigerator, had a scar running from his left temple to his jaw, and spoke in a low, measured voice that made you lean in to hear him, which meant you were always just a little bit off balance in his presence. On the last day of the program, Chief walked down the line of the 9 remaining candidates, stopped in front of each one, looked at them for a long moment. When he stopped in front of me, he looked at me for longer than anyone else. Then he said, Hades. I blinked. Sir? Your Callsign, he said. God of the underworld. Invisible kingdom. Most powerful of the 3 brothers, but the one nobody sees coming. He moved on down the line. I stood there, and something settled in my chest. Something that felt like recognition. like someone had just handed me the last piece of a puzzle I hadn't known I was building. Hades. I graduated Georgetown with honors. I won't go into detail about what I did after. The jobs, the assignments, the years. Some of it I can't talk about. Some of it I could talk about but won't, because this story isn't about proving anything. What I'll say is this. I served. I worked hard. I operated in places you wouldn't want to be, with people who were the best at what they did. And I held my own. I learned things about human nature that changed the way I see the world. I learned that strength isn't about size or volume or bravado. The scariest people I ever met were quiet. The most dangerous operators I ever worked beside looked like accountants or teachers or someone's nice neighbor who waves hello on Saturday mornings. I learned that the world is mostly made of people who have decided what other people are before they've bothered to find out, and I learned that being underestimated is not a weakness. It is a weapon. By 32, I had transitioned out of active field work and into consulting and training. I was based back in the Northeast, a little apartment in Boston, close enough to family that I could get home for holidays, far enough that I had my space. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic that needed a new muffler. I wore normal clothes. I had a cat named Atlas who knocked things off tables with complete deliberate malice and whom I loved more than almost anything. To anyone looking at me from the outside, I was an ordinary woman in her early 30s living an ordinary life. Which brings me back to the bar. It was a Saturday night in November. My Aunt Beverly was turning 60, and the family had gathered at a restaurant in Hartford, McGrath's Chop House, a nice place, big enough for the whole extended family chaos of the Voss-Patterson clan. Dinner was loud and warm and full of the specific energy of a family that loves each other, but hasn't been in the same room for too long. There were $12 cocktails and overpriced steaks and a birthday cake with trick candles that took Aunt Beverly 4 attempts to blow out. After dinner, a group of the cousins migrated to the attached bar area, and Marcus, 29 now, still selling trucks, still owning whatever room he walked into, slid into the seat beside me. We caught up the way cousins do. Surface-level stuff. His new apartment, my cat, a road trip he'd taken out west in a Dodge Ram he'd talked his boss into letting him borrow. And then, inevitably, Marcus being Marcus, the conversation shifted. He was telling a story about a fight that had broken out at a bar he'd been at the previous month. 2 guys, some kind of disagreement, the whole thing. He was performing it. Gestures and voices and dramatized punches, working the small audience of cousins around him. He turned to me, grinning, in the full flush of his own storytelling. Set up the next line, bring in a prop, the prop being his quiet little cousin in her nice earrings. "Can you fight?" he asked. And I said what I said, and he laughed. And then I said, "They called me Hades." The man at the bar, the one who dropped his drink, stood up slowly from his stool. He was maybe 55, big, the kind of build that used to be all muscle and was now partially something else, but still clearly formidable. Wearing a flannel shirt, dark jeans, work boots. A man who looked like he built things with his hands and didn't talk about it. He was staring at me like I'd just spoken a word in a language he thought only 3 people in the world knew. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was low, careful. "Did you say Hades?" Marcus, oblivious, was still laughing. "Yeah, that's what she says. I think she watched too many action movies." "Hades was a call sign," the man said. Not loudly, not aggressively, just stating a fact, the way you'd state that water is wet. In a program that ran out of Southern Virginia in the early 2010s. The laughter at our little corner of the bar faded. I looked at him. "What's your name?" I asked. "Barrett," he said. "Thomas Barrett, DEVGRU, retired. We overlapped with your program in 2013. You wouldn't have seen us. We were on the other side of the facility. But we heard about the candidates. We heard about the one they called Hades." He paused. I always assumed that was a man. I smiled, picked up my drink, took a slow sip. "Most people do," I said. Marcus was looking back and forth between us like he'd wandered into a conversation in a foreign language. "Wait," he said. Wait. What are you 2 talking about? Are you serious right now?" Barrett looked at my cousin, then back at me. There was something in his expression. Respect, amusement, the particular recognition of one professional acknowledging another. "Your cousin," he said to Marcus, "is either the person I think she is, or she's one of about 4 people on Earth who could convincingly pretend to be." He looked at me. "Verification?" I considered. Then I said a word. A single word. A piece of internal program language that meant nothing to anyone outside that world and everything to anyone inside it. Barrett closed his eyes briefly, opened them. "I'll be damned," he said quietly. He reached across the bar and shook my hand. "It's an honor, Hades." My cousin Marcus is not a bad person. I want to be absolutely clear about that. He's funny and loyal, and he'd drive 4 hours in a snowstorm to help you change a flat tire. He loves his mom. He tips his servers well. He has a good heart. He just, like most people, makes assumptions. He looked at me, the sundress, the earrings, the vanilla latte personality I present to the world. And he saw the complete picture. He saw all of it and thought he understood it. He didn't know about the summers, the program, the years of work in places whose names I still don't say out loud. He didn't know that the reason I was always a little too calm at family gatherings was that I'd learned to regulate my nervous system under conditions that would have broken most people. He didn't know that I'd assessed the exits of McGrath's Chop House the moment I walked in, that I'd clocked the body language of every person at the bar within 90 seconds of arriving, that I'd noted Barrett 2 hours before he spoke to me and filed him under former military, probable spec ops, no threat. He didn't know that the reason I never talked about myself at family gatherings wasn't shyness. It was discipline. After Barrett returned to his seat and Marcus sat in stunned silence, my cousin finally found his voice. "Elara," he said, "what are you?" I thought about how to answer that. I thought about Uncle Frank in the backyard, going through his movements in the summer heat. I thought about Dr. Cole saying you've trained, but you have bad habits. I thought about Chief walking down the line of 9 exhausted candidates and stopping in front of me. I thought about all the things I'd done and seen and survived that had built the person sitting at this bar in her Sunday earrings drinking a $14 whiskey sour. "I'm your cousin," I said, "Elara Voss, from Wethersfield, Connecticut. I like crime novels and vanilla lattes, and my cat's name is Atlas." I finished my drink. I just also happen to be very good at some other things. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. Then he burst out laughing. Real laughter, not the performed kind, but the helpless kind that happens when the world surprises you so completely that your body doesn't know what else to do. "Oh my God," he said, this whole entire time I thought you were the boring one." I grinned. "That," I said, "was the plan. I'm telling you this story not because I want to impress you. I'm telling you this story because of something Barrett said to me before we left the bar that night. We'd talked for almost 2 hours. Not about classified things, nothing inappropriate, just the strange shared language of people who have lived a certain kind of life. The particular dark humor. The way civilians say must have been scary, and you just nod because the real answer would take 3 hours and still wouldn't land. At the end of the night, he stood up, put on his jacket, and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said. "Does it bother you? The invisibility? Being the person nobody accounts for?" I thought about it seriously, the way the question deserved. "It used to," I said honestly. "When I was younger, there's a version of it that feels like erasure, like the world has decided you're not worth taking seriously. And now? Now I understand that invisibility is infrastructure," I said. "It lets you move. It lets you see, because people don't perform for people they don't think are watching. It lets you be without the weight of everyone's expectations about what you're supposed to be." Barrett nodded slowly. "The best operators I ever knew," he said, "were the ones nobody worried about." He left. And I sat there for a while longer, finishing my drink, watching the bar, the laughing groups, the couple in the corner, the bartender who had to tell when he was about to push last call, the door that opened every 4 minutes on average from the outside foot traffic. My cousin Marcus, next to me, was on his phone texting someone, probably retelling the whole evening, probably already making it into a story he'd tell for years. I didn't mind. Some stories are meant to be told. And some people are meant to be the kind of person those stories are about. My name is Elara Voss, And a long time ago, in a facility in rural Virginia, a man called Chief gave me a name that fit me better than any name I'd ever been given. Hades. Not the terrifying one. Not the loud one. Not the one people see coming. The one with the invisible kingdom. The one who was always there. The one nobody ever thought to worry about. Don't underestimate the quiet ones. We've been watching,